This is the Hollywood Outsider. I'm your host, Aaron Peterson, and welcome to a special episode of our show. For this episode, we're going to be talking to writer-director Jacob Roebuck, whose new film, Camp, is being released as we speak to a theater near you. You can find showtimes at thecampmovie.com. Jacob, welcome.
Hey, thanks. Good to be here.
Thanks. How's the promotional end of this movie wearing on you?
Well, you think that you're done with the film when you wrap, or maybe you're done when you post, but then you find out there's this whole other marathon you have to run, getting the film into theaters, and it's been very gratifying to share with audiences. But I've probably seen the film now in theaters at least 20 times. So
You still like it? I mean, it's your movie.
I enjoy watching the audience laugh. It's the places they're supposed to laugh and cry when they're supposed to cry. So that is good. And unlike my first feature, which had a couple of places that were kind of cringe moments for me, this film doesn't have any cringe moments, which is good.
I remember a long time ago, Steven Spielberg had an interview where he said the one thing he hates about making movies is by the time he's done with promotion, he hates his own movie because you see it so many times, you talk about it so many times, and you know.
Yes, I think one of my favorite pastimes is tearing apart my own movie. I love telling everybody. I can tell you exactly what's wrong with this movie better than you can tell me what's wrong with that movie.
That's probably a good thing, though.
You beat them to the punch.
There's
good.
too many directors that don't take a good enough look at that. Well, starters, Camp is an independent movie that you've put together with your producer, Emily Shubin. Did I say that
yes.
right? Okay.
Yep.
A lot of our listeners haven't heard of the film. I myself initially heard about it from word of mouth style from a friend of mine, Amy. So for starters, tell the audience what Camp's about.
The film takes place anywhere USA. There is a investment advisor named Ken Matthews trying to impress one of his clients, and gets his arm not really twisted, but ends up to impress the client, gets his arm twisted by his assistant to going to this camp for foster kids, and he thinks he's going to be a great counselor, and gets paired up with this kid named Eli, who has had a lot of abuse issues, and really underestimates what it takes to be a good counselor for this kid and ultimately to love him.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Now, you directed the film, but you also wrote it. What inspired this particular story?
After I finished my first film, we decided that we had to do a second one because we made so many mistakes on the first one, and we wanted a chance to capitalize on that investment. And so we were looking around. You want to make a film about something that you're passionate about, and my wife and I had started volunteering for Royal Family, and that's where we saw there were so many great stories that a lot of them just beautiful stories, a lot of heartbreaking stories, a lot of funny stories, and we just started collecting them and tried to form them into a script. I think the interesting how I got to camp. I was working on a communications staff at a church in California, and that summer the pastor said all the staff members have to lead a mission trip, and I'm thinking that's just fantastic. I'm already working full time in ministry, and now I've got to go do a mission trip with my spare time. And so first I think I'm gonna go down to Tijuana, Mexico, and build houses. I don't have to deal with people. And at the end, if I'm with the right group, we can go get margaritas and have fun at night. So, and then I see this opportunity to help at a camp for abused and neglected kids, and in my heart, I felt like I needed to go, and then I thought about it. It's like I don't work with kids. That whole part of the church where the kids go, I never go to that part. I think it's not wise to ignore what might be a divine prompting. So I found myself getting on the bus as a chaperone, and I'm thinking, wow, there's all these. This was the boys' bus, about 50 kids on it, and I'm like, I think the last time I spoke to a 10-year-old was when I was 10. And I'm really starting to get intimidated because I'm like, I don't know how to work with kids. And then I'm hearing some of the words these kids are using and some of the things they're saying to each other. And then I'm realizing these aren't the kids that run around at church on Sunday morning in the hallways. One kid in particular at the back of the bus, his name was Jose, had to be the smallest kid at camp, mean kid. He was mean to the other kids. He was mean to the adults. He was really good at like teasing the other kids in a way to where he couldn't get in trouble for it, but he caused them as much misery as possible.
Really?
And I remember thinking, man, this kid is rotten. I get to camp, and midweek I'm in the pool, and I'm talking to this kid Jose, and this is the first time I've seen him without. He's normally wearing like gangster clothes and baggy hoodies and stuff like that, and so he's in just swim trunks in the pool, and he's like, it's sunny outside, but he's just skin and bones, so the kid's shivering, and I'm talking to him. He's sitting on the edge of the pool, and I'm standing in the pool, so I'm kind of, looking at, I'm like eye level with his knees and his legs, and I noticed these marks on his legs, and I almost said it out loud, and I'm glad I didn't. I almost said, "Hey, Jose, what are those weird marks on your legs?" And then it just hit me that they were cigarette burns.
Oh, wow.
And in that moment, my worldview was radically altered. It was like, I realized that the people who God intended to love this kid, the people who are supposed to take care of this kid, hurt him in ways that I've never been hurt before. And I remembered back to a couple of days earlier when I met this kid on the bus, and I thought, wow, this kid is just rotten. And it really changed my perspective on a lot of things. And so later on in the week, we do a talent show at camp, and at the talent show, we let the kids get up there because these kids aren't the ones who end up being on soccer teams or end up being picked for school plays. And so we wanted to get them up there and cheer for them and get them some positive affirmation. And so Jose gets up there, he's going to do a rap, and we're a little worried what's he going to say. And he gets up there and he's looking really angry. He's mean, and he's got some guys behind with a microphone doing a beatbox thing. And he just he looks like this little gangster rapper, this little 10-year-old gangster rapper. He gets up there and he's all, I love camp. My counselor's awesome. The food is delicious. This is the best week ever. And we were like, whoa, what happened to Jose? And it hit me that this week of camp, this week of giving these kids a chance to experience unconditional love, a chance to just be kids, not have to worry about where their next meal's coming from, not have to worry about are they going to get beat. It's this incredibly powerful thing. And we've had kids that have grown up and they've come back to camp, and they bring their photos that we gave them after they leave camp. We give them a memory book, and they're like, these are the only photos I have of my childhood.
Oh, that's really sad.
And so it's this sweet, beautiful story. And so as we that this experience is heavy on my heart, and it's really changed my life. And I'm like, what can I do more? I want to do more to help these kids. And then I'm like, I remembered how hard it was for me to get to camp. I didn't want to go. And I'm like, well, let me make a movie that will get people excited about helping at camp. And so I had a bunch of people say, why don't you make a documentary? And I'm like, you know what? I love documentaries, but the people who go see documentaries are the people who are already excited about the topic.
Generally, yes.
And so I said, we should do a feature. And also, too, because these kids are wards of the state, many of them, you can't photograph them, you can't take pictures of them, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a lot of problematic. So we decided to take the feature route with it. And we I got connected with Emily, who I met at camp. And we just started working on it. And 3 years later, 4 years later, 3 years later, 3.5 years later, we here we are.
So I got to ask you, does the incident you were talking about at the pool, does that influence the scene with Miles or Eli?
Absolutely.
The character Eli played by Miles in the film?
Yeah, I think everything in the film is influenced by one of my experiences, or we sat down and we interviewed a dozen or so different counselors. And just had them tell us. We interviewed some that used to be kids, the camp that came back and stuff like that. And some of these interviews are during the credits. They're at the end of the film, which I think is a great way for people to see some of it. But and just these incredible stories came out, and even more than I had seen and experienced. And so we really had a wealth of stories. And in some ways, it was like, how are we going to even tell this? There was so much to tell, as well as we want to make it a film that is accessible to someone who hasn't been to camp. And we didn't want it to, so you have a film like Precious, which is really powerful, really heavy, and you have a film like
and super fun, by the way.
and you have a film like Blindside. And we're like, we don't want to be quite as light as Blindside, but we definitely want to have a lot more hope and fun than Precious. And so the reality is that the most of the time in the film we spend with these kids is when they're at camp, and that's when there's a lot of positive, sweet, sometimes bittersweet, but sweet things happening with these kids, and we just really in their conversations we really discover some of the things that have happened to these kids in the past.
I like that you're illustrating or illuminating the world and the fact that a lot of these kids are hurt, and they're not all just jerks because they were born jerks. I mean, they're actually good people. They're protecting themselves. Honestly, a lot of it.
It is amazing. We'll have social workers. They'll give us like this form. Oh, you got to watch out for this kid because he's going to do X, Y, and Z. And we get them to camp, and they're just, I was like, are we sure we have the right kid? And this scene didn't make the film, but there was one of the true stories was there's a kid who asked how much you get paid. Asked his counselor that, and it has happened. It's happened to like multiple, because these kids are pretty smart and they realize that their social worker gets paid, their group home people get paid. Anybody who cares about them in their life gets paid. And when they find out that the folks at the camp are there volunteering because they love them unconditionally, it's huge. And I think that we don't necessarily realize until you meet these kids how influential it is to our development, our esteem, to who we are, that our parents loved us unconditionally. If we didn't have that foundation, think about your own. I mean, we're insecure enough creatures as is. You take that piece out, and it causes all kinds of problems. Oh, yeah. So
people definitely take their own families for granted.
Absolutely.
Everybody's got it so tough, and they forget about the people that actually have it really tough. Now, how does the film highlight the camps, and specifically the kids who are not always simply foster kids, but also kids who are just displaced and with families that aren't really their parents? Yeah.
So what happens? The film, we tell this film mainly through the eyes of Ken, who is the guy who came up to camp to impress a prospective client, and he slowly discovers what's happened to Eli, and at the end of camp, it's radically affected his worldview. In some ways, the film is semi-autobiographical, except that I'm not rich and I don't drive Porsches around. But
so you juiced it up, made it a little bit more interesting for you.
Yes. So my life was a little bit more boring. So we made the main guy a investment banker or investment advisor. So what happens along the way we have Ken but it's really Ken and Eli, and then his partner counselor and a kid named Redford. Redford's an interesting character. He's in some ways he's comic relief, but he's got another layer to him. He thinks he's an alien, and he thinks that the mothership is going to return for him. And at one level, he's hilarious. Until we get to the point where Eli says that you're not an alien and the mothership's not coming for you, and we realize that like a lot of these kids, this is a coping mechanism for him. Because he wants to hope and he wants to believe that someone's coming for him someday. And these kids all, even if they've been abused by their parents in terrible ways, they still want parents. They want they want to belong to somebody. And so that, with his character, even though a lot of the story, and it is funny, and we want people to laugh, but there is that underlying heaviness to it. We also meet some of the other kids, and on the surface, you go to camp and you look at it, and they look like normal kids until something like one of the stories I think is probably one of the scenes that we have gotten the most feedback on in the film is a scene where, and it's based on a true story, a scene where this girl doesn't want to go to bed because bed is a dangerous place. where she's most likely, and we don't say this explicitly in the film, but where she's been sexually molested.
Oh.
And so it's this great scene about how the counselors, I'm not going to give it away, but how the counselors help this girl to where she can sleep peacefully, and it's very beautiful. Scene. So in some ways, we get to tell the happy stories, happy stories of this, and in some ways, the movie in some ways wrote itself.
Mm-hmm.
It really did. There was really so much material, stories like that we were really excited to share. I think at the very beginning of the film, the bus gets there, and there's a girl who doesn't get off the bus, and so they go. Her counselor goes on the bus just to figure out what's going on, and finds out that she doesn't know what camp is, and she was put on the bus, and nobody really told her where she was going, and so she was scared. She doesn't know she's going to a new place. She doesn't realize that camp is this place for people to have fun and. Do
they do that? They try to surprise them
not for surprise.
Okay.
Just for these kids get shuffled around. They're just and not every kid that comes to camp is in a terrible situation, but it is shocking the number that are. Where and again, this true story that we had a girl who came to camp and she wouldn't get off the bus because she didn't know where she was because they didn't bother to tell her.
Wow.
And a lot of them, especially the ones that are in group homes, it's I hate to say this, but it's like a prison. They're on a schedule. You come here, you eat your meal, you go back to your, you do this, you do this, you do this, and it's very regimented. And maybe it has to be that way. A lot of these kids do. I'm not saying that. I don't want to judge that, but it's not optimal for the kids. So we get so there's all these little stories. I think one story that was something that I remember watching this, and there was a girl. This is at the end of camp, getting on the bus. There was two buses going back to different locations, and one girl's on the one bus, and the one girl, she had come up to camp and she was going back to a different place. She had been transferred to a different home, and the other girls. It was beautiful and it was sad at the same time. This other girl's comforting her, saying, "Oh, I've been to that place. It's all right. They've got a great playground. They got nice people there." You see this kid comforting this other kid. And if you imagine, you're a parent. I'm a parent. You imagine somebody taking your kid, and your kid doesn't know that they're going to live in your house next week. And so that's the backdrop for the film. Now, there's a lot of fun things that happen in the film. Because it's camp and fun things happen at camp and kids are doing things, and a lot of these kids are achieving great things. One of the big deals at camp is the swim test. That's where you swim across the deep end and you get the band that signifies that you are eligible to swim in the deep end at the pool. And so it's a rite of passage at camp, and that's one of the main conflicts in the film. But it is amazing for these kids to do that and to get that and to have somebody care enough about them to do that. And there's another story that we tell in the film briefly, and so many of the stories we just kind of touch on. But one summer, somebody donated a bunch of bicycles to camp. We're like, "Oh, that's great!" So we put them all together and threw them out there. And of course, our kids coming to our camp are they're 7 through 11 or 12. Excuse me. And so these kids come to camp. They're ages 7 through 11. And so most kids by that point know how to ride a bike. But think about it. What does it take to learn how to ride a bike? You need an adult. You need a parent or a big brother or big sister or somebody who is patient enough to help you up, put you back on the bike, and encourage you. It takes a lot of adult interaction to learn to ride a bike. And we had several kids there who were 11, 12, who didn't know how to ride a bike, which is very sad. The fun thing about it is we got to teach them.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
And it really, and I remember seeing this in real life. I remember standing there watching this girl ride the bike for the first time, and she was just so happy. What a stigma to be if you're the only kid in, whatever grade that would be, second or third grade, and you don't know how to ride a bike, and every other kid does.
I'm sure it's humiliating. Yeah.
So
that's It's very nice that you're showcasing that, because I mean, so many camp movies are meatballs and or Friday the 13th. I mean, nothing really.
It is kind of. I think you're right. I think it is kind of funny because when you think of camp movies, you think of either they're slashers, they're horror films,
Yep.
or they're like band camp.
Mm-hmm.
They're like coming of age stories, comedies and stuff like that. So. And it was interesting because as we were talking to different camp directors and people and saying, we're actually going to do a story, which a lot of people who are in the camping world, they believe camp is a life-changing experience, whether it's this kind of camp or it's just a retreat kind of camp or whatever it might be, Boy Scout camp, whatever. It's a chance. That's what the purpose of going to camp is. You go and it helps you grow and it changes your life. And we really, not that I know of. And you can ask some of your movie buff professionals, but I don't think that there's been a movie before that has really chronicled what really happens at camp, so to speak, and that people learn, they grow, and hopefully they become better people.
Yeah.
Now in this case, of course, these kids, hopefully we're giving them hope for the future, because the sad reality is that a lot of these kids are going to end up in prison. A lot of them are going to end up being teen pregnancies. Mm-hmm. 30% end up abusing their own children.
Wow.
So it's a terrible cycle, and it's our hope that for some of these kids we can break that cycle.
I would actually, thinking about it, I think you're probably right. There's almost every camp movie is either a slasher flick, which I like those, and or a meatballs or a coming of age where you're just focused on one kid and how he finally meets the girl and meets the love of his life. It's never really focused on what you really learn. I went to camp as a kid, and it was very much. I mean, you learn life skills, and you have a good experience.
Mm-hmm.
You make friends. I mean, there's a lot more to it than just hijinks. Because I don't recall a lot of hijinks. Because you're pretty much kept in line. It was mostly just have fun and make friends.
Probably the best scene. I'm not going to give it away, but I shouldn't say the best scene. But one of my personal favorite scene is a hijinks. Is a prank. So.
Well, they're definitely pranks, but it's not. I mean, sometimes they go a little elaborate in movies. You know how that goes.
So yeah, but in this case, it was great because it was Eli and Ken. It was the counselor and the kid who do the prank together, and then we see that they bonded. We've seen that they've come together, and now they're on the same team, which is a really an awesome thing, and it's a great way to do it because neither of them are people who follow the rules. Mm-hmm. So it really fits their personalities well to do something like that.
And outside of the acceptance and understanding of how hard many of these kids have it, what do you hope to accomplish with the movie? I mean, obviously, you want to as many people in the world to see it as possible.
Sure, yeah, and it's a movie. Our main purpose was to entertain our audience. That's why people that's why people go to the theaters, to be entertained. That's certainly what it is. Above and beyond that, we sure hope that when people see the film, and we've gotten some feedback from the 5 places we played already. Mm-hmm. We've gotten some feedback. We sure hope that people who see this, so people will be inspired. They'll want to go to camp. They'll want to go be a counselor. We certainly hope that happens. We want to bring some awareness to these kids. These kids, it's really amazing that how many of these kids we have them tucked away in every community. Mm-hmm. And when we have this great system that in some ways is we have a great safety net in some ways, but it hides them from everybody else, and we don't see it and we don't know it, so we don't have to deal with it. Mm-hmm. And I remember even for me when I went to camp the first time, I was really worried, like how am I even going to relate? What are these? These kids are going to be weird. I don't know what I was afraid of, but the unknown, I guess. And then realizing that, wow, these are normal kids who've had some really hard things happen to them, but they're normal kids. And I think when you realize they're normal kids, and I think that's what we want people to see in the film, or we hope that they find it in the film. We hope people realize that, hey, these are normal kids who've had bad things happen to them, but they're not monsters. They're not freaks. They are just children doing the best they can with the hand they've been dealt, which isn't a good one.
And one thing that I think is important to note, because I talked to Kathy, she's the director of one of the local Royal Family Kids camps, and she spoke very, very highly. I was very just thrilled, almost in tears over the movie because how close to home it hit. but she specifically said how the kids are, unlike a lot of summer camps where it's like one counselor, 5, 10, 15 kids. I mean, these counselors have 1 or 2 kids. And this is probably, for them, those particular kids, the most attention they get the whole year. I mean,
Yeah,
for them.
no, that's absolutely right. You know, I think, and that's, some people watch the movie and it's kind of interesting because we can't go, because the movie, it would be 8 hours long if we explained everything about how the royal family works. Right. You know, the camp that I volunteered with, and I still try to go to when I can, even though I don't live in California anymore, is we brought 130 adults and 100 kids. These kids need lots of one-on-one attention. And so you basically, one counselor has, in the movie it's 1-to-1. In real life it's 1-to-2. One counselor for every 2 kids. But then you also have all the people doing all the activities, the support staff, the mailroom people, the actors doing the skits. And so it ends up being a 1-to-1, which is fantastic because then these kids are never lacking for attention the whole week they're there. And they need as much attention as they can get. Also, too, some of them are a handful.
Sure.
Some of the kids, you know, if you didn't have their case file, you wouldn't know that they had been through some pretty serious stuff. But some of them, it's very obvious very quickly that they are not socially adjusted. And so it's helpful to have all those extra people. If you think about a classroom, and we all went to school, you can think about a classroom with 1 teacher and 20 kids or 30 kids, and sometimes the teacher will lose control of the class. The kids take over. We have enough adults to where the kids can't take over.
That's good, though. I mean, that's
very, very important. Yeah,
I thought I've got friends that were foster parents, so I know how little attention a lot of those kids have gotten, and that to me was one of the most impressive things. I think some people don't realize that a lot of those kids don't get normal attention like most kids do.
No, I mean, you think back to your own parents. Even if you had bad parents, you know, or by whatever standard, you know, that they weren't, you know, the dad worked too much or whatever. You still probably got a lot more attention than these kids did. Yeah. So
now we know a lot more about the film and your goal, and I mean, obviously from what I've heard, it's very entertaining. I'm gonna watch it, and we're gonna review it on the next episode.
Awesome.
But how did you manage to get them? No, well, hey, I've heard good things, and it's from people that don't just tell me fluff. So,
good.
How did you manage to get the movie made? We know how hard it can be to make an independent movie. So, what was your experience?
Well, I live in New Mexico now, but I lived in Orange County for about 8 years, and it's in the LA area, and there's a lot of people who talk about making a movie. There's a lot of people who want to make a movie, and talking about making a movie and getting one done are 2 different things. And I was at a film festival at Breckenridge with my first film, and I remember being with this group of people, of all who had actually finished a film. And I told them, I said, "You guys are awesome, because no matter what happens, you have done something that everybody talks about, but very few people have made it to the finish line." And so anybody who's if anybody's tried to make a film, it's a hard. I mean, I think the thing about filmmaking is you think about as an art. If you're a painter, you just need an easel, some paint, and a quiet space, and you can work over 10 years to make your masterpiece or whatever. If you're a musician, you practice in your room. I mean, there are some expenses involved, but you cannot make a film by yourself.
True.
It requires, even the smallest film with the simplest cast requires, 15 people, 20 people on set.
Money and people, yeah.
And those people need to be fed, and if it's more than a short film, people will volunteer to work on a short film for a weekend. But then all of a sudden they have bills to pay too, and so they got to be fed. And so it takes a ton of resources. And I think for me with this film, it's been tremendously humbling how many people have gone out of their way to number one, give us money, everywhere from $5 to $5,000. The actors who worked for next to nothing and did fantastic job, and it's an ensemble cast, and kids too, who were stellar. Sometimes it might have been a little bit better than the adults. That's just between you and me.
Yeah.
Don't tell anybody.
Yeah, nobody will hear it. It's okay.
Nobody will hear it. So, and so you've got all these people, and so you're the writer director, and it's like, you don't have any money. I mean, a little bit to make ends meet, and all these people are giving their lives to this film, whether it's the 3 weeks on set or whether it's the producers who have, who have their normal day jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they get home from their LA producing gig, then they start working on your film. And then you understand, wow, there's a lot of people out there who believe in this story. And I think ultimately that's the most important thing, is that the people working on if you can only make an independent film if you believe in it.
Mm-hmm.
If you believe in what you're trying to do, if you believe in the story, you think it needs to be heard, and that passion fuels you. Because there's so many times when, this project in particular, there's so many times when it felt like if one more thing goes wrong, we're going to fall off the track.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we were always on the edge, the whole production, even now, even as we're getting to theaters, although things are I'm starting to feel the weight come off a little bit in the last couple of weeks, but, it's really amazing. We had a minor issue with SAG.
Mm-hmm.
We signed with the Screen Actors Guild because it's very difficult, especially to hire children without being signed with
mm-hmm.
the guild. And their SAG's a pretty. I hope SAG's listening. SAG's they're not too bad to work with. They do a pretty good job, and they serve an important function for the actors.
Mm-hmm.
But you're filing paperwork, whatever. And there was a mess up with our paperwork, and so then they looked closely at our script, and they're like, and we filed for an ultra low budget, so we can pay them less than scale.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, we're not going to approve it because we looked at the script, and you can't make this film for this amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was 2 hours that I'm literally, I don't know if you've been to the SAG building, but it's this 20-story building, no windows. It's this huge edifice, intimidating. It's on Wilshire. It's right next to the Bray Tar Pits, and there's the big SAG logo on it in gold. And so you're walking into this massive building, and
because they need 20 stories.
I'm this little indie film producer, and there's all these people walking around looking really important in Hollywood. I'm like, and the lady I needed to talk to, she wouldn't even see me. So I'm standing in the lobby talking on my cell phone,
mm-hmm.
talking to her, because she didn't have time for me to come up to her office.
While you're in the building?
While I'm in the building, yes. And she was mad because we'd screwed up the paperwork, and it was causing her more problems too.
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't a good situation. So there was 2 hours. I'm in LA. I'm driving around, and I'm thinking that we're not going to be able to shoot.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking to my wife back on the phone. And I'm like, honey, I'm glad we live in New Mexico, because I'm coming back there, and I'm going to hide under a rock because all these people think we're shooting a movie next week. And luckily, our line producer was able to talk to somebody else and explain, hey, we weren't trying to scam the system. We really don't have a lot of money, et cetera, et cetera. And we got it worked out, but it's been terribly difficult. And it's like climbing a mountain. It really is. It's never, it's really exciting. And then after you've been climbing for about an hour, you're like, why did I start doing this again?
But how does it feel once you're at the top? It feels a little better?
It feels a lot better. It's it's like climbing a mountain. What does it feel like when you're at the top? You're like, wow, I'm glad I did it.
I don't know. I give up and go back down.
Well, find a smaller mountain. Start with that.
That's right. I'll start with hills.
Start with the hill. So there was a film that I saw at Breckenridge that, a couple of years ago with my first film. There was a film there, a documentary about a bicyclist, and I don't remember much about the film, but the thing that stuck with me was the bicyclist saying, "You just keep pedaling. You just stay on the bicycle. You just keep going, and you don't know exactly how you're going to make it, but you just keep taking that one step at a time." And I think that's what we do with this film. Mm-hmm. We did not know how we were going to get into theaters. We did not know how we were going to pay for post-production. We did not know how we were going to hire children. I mean, all different stuff. We didn't know these things. Mm-hmm. But we said, well, what can we do right now and take that next step? And that's I guess that's what you have to do. But it also takes a huge sacrifice from your family.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. I moved to New Mexico. I don't live in LA anymore because I can afford to live here and make movies. I can't afford to live in LA and make movies, which seems counterproductive.
Mm-hmm.
but I can actually literally fly back to LA when I need to, and with the money I save on cost of living, I still end up ahead. But you make the sacrifice. Not that we like to live. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that we don't like New Mexico. We love it here, but you have to make decisions that make it possible, and you have to make sacrifices in your other areas of your life. I'd love to have a much bigger house and a newer car,
giant pool,
a giant pool. That would be good. But those are the sacrifices that you have to make. So filmmaking is a lot of sacrifice at this level, but hopefully you get to touch lives.
Now, your actors, I mean, you've got actually a good quality cast, even though a lot of them are unknown at this point. How did you find them, and how is it working with kids, especially?
Yeah. Well, so, casting director on a small budget is a lot of money. You have to put out for a casting director. And so sometimes you like, I might try to do this myself. And casting is one thing you can kind of do yourself, but except the fact that we had kids in the film. And so we thought, you know what, with kids in the film, we need to get some professionals. We had Dean and Donald Pemrick, casting agents, who a friend referred them to us. They took an amazing pay cut to help us out with the film. I was like one of those people who said, "Hey, we like the script. We want to see this movie made," and they helped guide the process. But even before that, we started by we started casting our adults ourselves, and we just went on to like lacasting.com or something like that, and started looking at headshots of actors. We knew we weren't going to be able to afford any big names, and so acting is interesting. Short story, on my first film, we did some pickup shoots in California, and we added a line. So we said we needed somebody to come in and read this line. It's just one line part, and one of my PAs said, "Oh, I live with two girls. They're both aspiring actresses." I said, "Well, bring them down." And one was a blonde and one was a brunette. Well, our lead was a brunette, so we said, "Well, we'll use the blonde." And we have another line for the brunette, so she came down too. But by the time we got to that part we wanted to shoot, the sun had gone down and we didn't have any more shooting days. So we called her. She was on her way down to the set, and we said, "Sorry, we just this part we offered you like yesterday just got cut."
Oh,
and I feel bad for actors because it's really, really tough. And so flash forward a couple years, I am doing interviews for counselors to come to camp, because at this point I'm now an assistant director of our camp, and I'm talking to this one girl, and she says, "Yeah, I want to be an actress, whatever." And I'm like, I said, "Yeah, I being an actress is really hard." And I just told her that story that I told you, and she said, "I'm the brunette."
That's funny.
And thankfully she got a part in my next movie. She's in camp. She's the nurse, but she is Emily Shubin. She ended up producing camp for me.
Oh, that's funny.
So, but acting is difficult. The guy who played Michael Matera, who played who played Ken, who did a fantastic job. When he walked into our audition, he was like, "I think I'm done with acting."
Oh, really?
And he said, "Whatever, I'm just going to do the audition. I'm just going to have fun with it." And he did. He came in and we were like, "Wow, we really like him. We think he's charming." But it was a difficult part because you can't totally hate the guy. Mm-hmm. You have to come around to liking him at some point. But
he has to have that certain level of arrogance, though.
He's really got to set off. This isn't FAA. I can say asshole, right?
Yeah, you can say whatever you want.
Okay, he's got to set off. He's got to register as an asshole to you. Mm-hmm. And so it was a difficult part, and this guy did it, and he's gonna love that I said that he played asshole well. but he did. But then at the end of the movie, he was likable enough that we could come around and we could like him. I think a lot of the casting we just lucked out. We got great people. On a small budget, you don't have a lot of time to cast. You don't have a lot of you can't like re-audition everybody 18 times and have them come back and whatever, because people won't, because they know you're not paying anything. Mm-hmm. So like, really, I'm gonna come back with a fourth audition for this ultra low rate. And so we did really well. It was interesting on this set, especially. The cast was phenomenal. Normally, you have at least one or two. They're like, "Wow, I wish I didn't cast that person. Mm-hmm. They're causing more problems," but we didn't. And I was really surprised because we had so many people on it. But we had such a good vibe on the set. People were there because they wanted to make a great movie. They were there because they believed in the story we were telling. And we had lots of good food. So
That helps.
that combination. We were shooting it. We were shooting in Sequoia National Forest. It was beautiful. I think something else that helped too is that we had no cell phone service.
Oh, so you had to be together. You had to be like a team.
And you couldn't leave. You couldn't just. We were an hour and a half from Fresno. Was the closest city to us. And who wants to go to Fresno? So, sorry, Fresno. We're opening up in Fresno in a couple of weeks. I hope nobody from Fresno listens to this, but
or
if they do,
at least not until like a month from now. Then it's okay.
Yeah, that's okay. So,
and you're doing a lot of your own marketing. I mean, you guys are really doing a grassroots effort.
It's a $0 marketing campaign, and that was challenging, getting a distributor to sign on for that. And Freestyle releasing their great operation. If you ever have an independent film and you want to try to find a good distributor, if you can get those guys to sign with you, they work really hard for you. They've done a great job. But we had to sit down with them and explain, hey, we know we're not buying billboards. We know we're not doing all these things, but at each of these camps, there are people who like you talked to Kathy, and when they see the film, they see their own story, and so they're going to want to see their story on the screen. And what it does great for these camps is they're like, I see my own story, and I've been trying to tell my friend Joe or whoever about camp, and I can't explain it to him in words. And we used to always say, well, the only way to really understand camp is you have to go and see it for yourself. Well, I think hopefully that's still true to an extent, but I think with the movie, people can get the idea. We showed a very early cut to my camp, like on the Sunday before the kids got there. It was really interesting because after the camp, the rookies, a lot of them came to me and said, you know what, that really helped. They kind of gave me a picture of what the camp was and what it was like and what to expect, and that everything was going to be okay too. Because a lot of people, you can imagine going into there, we prepare the counselors for the worst because we don't know exactly what they're going to get, and it's never as bad as you can imagine, but it was helpful. So I think that's been a fun sort of side benefit from the film, to talk to these but these people are passionate, and so back to your distribution question, when you have a passion, there's nothing more important to go see a film than somebody recommends it to you.
Absolutely.
That's the most important thing. It's better than a trailer. It's better than anything. And for a film of our scale, that's really, even if you saw a trailer for this film, even if you see a billboard, if there's no actors that you know of, unless you're a drama junkie, it's not like you're not going to go for the special effects, which there are a couple. We have a couple low budget special effects. Which we were really proud of.
You're proud that you were able to pull it off?
Yes, that we were able to pull it off. But the word of mouth is the most important thing on a film like this. And so we knew that we had these centers of people who were going to relate to the story personally. But even like you said, you had camp experience. Everybody has a camp experience in life. Almost everybody has a camp experience. And the movie is called Camp for a reason. It's about what happens at camp. And even though this camp happens to be for abused and neglected kids, they still do the things that you did at camp. They have bonfires, they go canoeing, they have archery, they go fishing, they climb rocks. They're doing camp things in the movie, and people can relate to that. They do pranks, and
hijinks.
So
we call them hijinks.
Hijinks, yes. So people can relate, and so we feel like that a lot of people are gonna have an emotional connection to the film. Absolutely.
And how did you get into, like, specifically, how did you get into writing and directing? I mean, was it always a passion for you, or just something
that's interesting. So some people say, well, what's it like now that you've achieved your dream? And I'm like, I'm trying to remember back when this became a dream for me. Really, I out of college, I got a degree in broadcasting because I got a scholarship for broadcasting. I actually went to college to become a youth pastor, and that didn't work out. But I got a degree and I ended up going in broadcasting, and it was right at the time when digital was just starting. I remember we bought a 4 gigabyte drive for $4,000 that we could edit. We could edit 5 minutes of standard definition video on it or something silly like that. And it would render overnight. And so I had this communications background. I spent the first 10 years of my post-college career doing marketing, and a lot of web production and video production and stuff like that. At some point, I decided to get my master's in leadership and ethics. And when I did that, John Brown University has it's called the Soderquist Center. It's a great program, and they really challenged us. It's basically a business degree. It's similar to an MBA, only less numbers and more leadership kind of stuff. And they challenged us. Are you doing what you're really designed to do? And I was doing, I had a small marketing production firm in Arkansas where I lived, and we were doing great. But I realized that at the end of the day, I didn't really care about what I was doing. And my wife and I talked about it, and we said, we got to do something. And I said, well, my skill sets are in media, and media, you can do great things with film. So let's go try to do something in entertainment. And honestly, the first thing I looked at was video games. I said, I want to produce some video games. And the reality was, at that point, it was, now I probably would have done video games, because with the iPad and the iPhone, you can actually do it at a smaller scale, and there's actually a way to make it profitable. But at that time, there was no iPhone or iPad, or they weren't out quite yet. A couple of years before them. And so the films was an entertainment medium that was accessible to me. And so I said, well, that's the medium that I can do. So I said, I had no idea what I was doing. I picked up a book called Reel to Deal. I read it in one night, cover to cover. That's my formal film training. And then I started working on it. I just followed the plan the guy laid out in the book. But there was a road trip my wife and I were on, and we were talking about it. And I realized in my heart that when I'm 60 years old or I'm 70 years old, am I going to look back, and what am I going to look back and see? Am I going to be like, I'm glad I didn't make a movie, or I'm glad I tried, even if I fail? At least I tried. And what's worse, to try and fail and not try at all? And for some people, maybe it is to not try at all. But for me, it was, I would rather have known that I tried and failed. I have enough self-confidence that I'm going to be able to live with myself if I do. And I think that for a lot of people, I think that is, we live in a culture that teaches us to avoid risk at all costs. I mean, that's why the insurance business does so well. That's why people, I think it's amazing. You go into the Apple store or to Best Buy or whatever, and they say, oh, and for an extra 20%. And I wish I would have started doing this a long time ago, but I challenge somebody needs to do this and write an article on it. Just tally up every time they ask you how much money they want you to pay, and put that aside in a virtual bank account or even a real bank account. See, and you're but we're so risk averse. I think if you can free yourself from being afraid of failure, you can try amazing things. And so for me, it was like, I'm more afraid of getting to 60, 70, 80, whenever it is that I cash my chips in. I'm more afraid of getting to that point and being like, wow, I never tried. Than I am right now trying and failing. So in our first film, in some ways it was a success. We got distribution for it. It was funny. I got an email from my friend who was in Dubai. And he's like, hey, I just saw your movie on cable. It's like, oh, wow, that's great. And I didn't email him back, but like, yeah, they paid $6,000 for the rights for Middle East.
For the whole Middle East?
Yeah, for the whole Middle East, we got $6,000, which is better than zero.
Yeah, that's true.
We didn't break even on the first film. But we got distributed, which was awesome. We got in theaters. We got, we're on Netflix. We're enjoying a resurgence on Netflix, which is fun. But even for Netflix, I think our deal's technically confidential, but it was less than the price of a car, an economy car.
We'll leave the number amount out of it.
We'll leave the number amount out, but it wasn't a ton of money. It didn't recover cost. And then it's like, okay, we're gonna do another one. It's like, wow. And at that point, it was more of, how can we not do another one? Because we learned so much making the first one. We made so many mistakes that, wow, we can we do the next one, we can build off our experience, and so that's kind of how we made the second one. I love it's a blessing. It's a privilege to be able to work in film and to work in feature films. And I never want to take that for granted that I've had this opportunity. I hope I get to do it again. I definitely have a lot of ideas rolling around in my head, but there's a lot of people who don't get the opportunity for various reasons. And it's been a privilege, and working on camp has been a privilege. The people who have worked on this film with me, and I said this earlier, have sacrificed so much to make this happen. So it's a big privilege because there's not a big studio backing. There's not somebody who's got like tons of money and it's like going to make money regardless because it's Transformers, so it doesn't matter how bad it is because we all want to see Transformers because that they're cashing in our childhood.
Now, if you would have thrown a Optimus Prime in the camp, I think you probably would have been making hundreds of millions by now.
We probably would have, and we would have been giving those to Hasbro.
Yeah, exactly. Now, after this calms down and however the release ends up panning out, what are your next projects that you got lined up?
So I live in New Mexico now. Now, when I lived in California, I shot my film in New Mexico. And now that I live in New Mexico, it ended up that I shot my film in California, ironically enough. But I want to shoot a film. Living here in New Mexico, I'm like, it's like living in a Western. It feels like I live in a Western film. I see people riding horses down the street. There's cows and empty space, and it's beautiful. And so I'm working on a Western script based on the song, and I hope nobody who owns the rights to the song hears this because I want to negotiate later, but on the song Ghost Riders in the Sky.
Okay.
So I'm really excited about that. So hopefully nobody who has the rights heard this and they're like, uh-oh, we got to beat him to it. But I'm really excited about that because it's got a nice. The song is a nice myth to it about the Devil's Herd and the Ghost Riders. It's almost like a Christmas Carol.
Okay.
Where you have Jacob comes back to warn Scrooge. What's his name? What's the name of the main character? I can't think of it.
Ebenezer Scrooge.
Ebenezer Scrooge. Yep. Yes, it was Scrooge. It was last name.
I was thinking of Bill Murray for some reason. So
yes. Comes back and he warns them, and that's the song. That's what happens to Ghost Riders. The bad cowboy who's in cowboy hell, chasing cows forever in the sky, warns the cowboy who's still living, change your ways. And so that's the mythos. There's no real story to the song necessarily, but I want to use that mythos to do a Western. The other thing I'm working on, which will probably happen faster because it's probably going to require less of a budget. Although it is another step. It's based on a true story. A friend of mine who's a retired college professor. My wife and I got to know him when he was one of our professors, and we went on a lot of double dates with his wife. His wife, they were married. His wife passed away about a year ago now. They were married for, I want to say, 60 years, and of that 60 years, she had MS, multiple sclerosis, for like more than half of it. Wow! And it's this beautiful, sad, sweet love story, and they had a beautiful marriage and a beautiful love and a beautiful relationship. And like I remember we went out to eat dinner with them a couple times, and at that point the MS had advanced for her where he would have to feed her, and he would take a bite. We'd be in this nice Italian restaurant. He'd take a bite, he'd give her a bite. He'd take a bite, he'd give her a bite. And so it's this beautiful love story. And I think one thing that's interesting, trials in our lives bring out our true character. And most of us have intense trials, but they're usually a short period of time, like a week, a month, maybe a year. In this case, they had this trial for 30 plus years.
That's a long trial.
It exposes, that's a long time for your character, who you really are, to be exposed, because most of us were hiding, behind, because nothing's testing us. And so it's interesting. And there's so many stories about his interaction with the students, stuff like that. The thing that really makes it exciting for me from a film standpoint is that also in their contemporaries, they had some friends who, same thing happened to them. As far as that, it was a husband and wife, and the wife got MS. They were about 5 years ahead of of Jim and Linda, my professor and his wife, and their story went a completely different way, had a dark end. And so I think there's this beautiful like parallel stories going on. It's a true story, which always makes it more interesting. And so I'm really excited to, and I'm hoping later this month actually to sit down with Jim and do some interviews. Probably spend a couple of days interviewing him. He's a great storyteller, and so there's so much great material. You have to have a flawed hero to make a great movie. I think one reason that Spider-Man or Batman does better than Superman is because Superman's not a flawed hero.
Yeah, he's perfect.
He's perfect.
Absolutely perfect.
He's absolutely perfect, and we like flawed heroes because we're flawed people, and we want to believe that we can be a hero too. Potentially, there's a hero inside of us, and I think that there is.
Are you gonna start singing? I think it's a song.
and so that's one thing I'm really excited about this film. You know, you look at love, and this is me and kind of being a Hollywood outsider. Hollywood gives us this Hollywood. If I use candy as a metaphor for love, and when you first fall in love, you know, your high school romance or whatever, it's cotton candy. It's big and it's fluffy. It's this. It's really attractive. But when you actually eat cotton candy, there's nothing in it. And then as life goes on and your relationship develops, you get, you know, you might maybe next you go to Skittles and then maybe M&Ms and Reese's Peanut Cups and then dark chocolate. Now, if you give a kid dark chocolate, they're not going to like it. But love changes over time. Relationships change over time, and I think Hollywood does a great job of telling that cotton candy story.
They don't do a good job with the long-term stories.
But they don't do that. They don't do that long-term story, and I think in some ways it does people a disservice because a lot of times people think that, wow, love is cotton candy, but here I am, and this is M&Ms. We think that it's going to stay cotton candy, and it doesn't stay cotton candy. But then we think maybe something wrong because I've learned from watching so many movies about cotton candy that it should always be cotton candy, and that's just not true. And so I hope with this next project, assuming we're going to make the film, that's something that we can talk about with our audience. Take a deeper look at what love really is, and it's not this. And not that I have anything against romance and stuff like that. I think it's great. I love a romantic comedy as much as the next guy, even though guys don't say they don't really, they really do. If you look at the statistics, they go and watch romantic comedies quite a bit.
We're legally required to.
We are. The long answer to your short question, that's the next project.
I look forward to that. Now, before we wrap up, any final thoughts or requests for the audience? So anything that they can do to support the movie?
Sure. Obviously, if you go to our website, thecampmovie.com, you can watch a trailer there. You can see where it's playing. If you can get to a theater, fantastic. We'd sure love to sell you a ticket. We're really hoping, our fingers are crossed, we want to break 1 million on this one. That's kind of our goal. Right now we're scheduled to play in about 100 cities. So it's a stretch goal, but it's doable.
And every portion of the ticket goes toward a camp.
Oh, yes. Right? Which is good. Thanks for bringing that out. We made the film to tell a great story, but we also want to benefit and bless the camps. They every year they have to raise volunteers and they have to raise money. And so we we made this movie on the cheap. So if we do decently well with it, we'll be able to recover our costs and we can give some of the money from each ticket to the local camp to send more kids to camp. So we're really fortunate to have that opportunity to be able to give a portion of the proceeds. We're giving not half of the ticket, but half of what we get. We're giving that to the camps to help get more kids to camp.
That's very impressive, sincerely. And again, the website is thecampmovie.com, and it's playing now in theaters nationwide. Yeah,
and it's a select theater, so it's playing in different places through the end of May. Through the end of April. And
people can request showings or screenings and see if that's possible by going to the website.
Absolutely. If you think you can get a crowd to the theater, we want to talk to you. Absolutely. Go to the website. There's ways to contact us there. But we'd sure, if you think you can get a crowd, we're looking for, right now we have about 75 markets out of the 100 nailed down. We have about 25 more markets we want to nail down. If it does well, we'll take it out to more, obviously. At that point, we'll have a little more resources and we might be able to take it out to more theaters. So.
Well, thanks again, Jacob, for coming. We really appreciate it, sincerely.
Hey, thanks so much. Pleasure talking to you. And thanks for helping us share the story of these kids.
Absolutely. And best of luck with the movie. That's Camp. It's playing, like I said, at theaters nationwide. Thanks again for listening to this special edition of Hollywood Outsider Podcast. And be sure to come back every week for a new regular episode. We will be reviewing Camp on our next episode, so find that. We're available on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, or anywhere else you can get an RSS feed. As well as our website, thehollywoodoutsider.com, facebook.com/thehollywoodoutsider, and Twitter, _outsider. And remember, the next time you head to a theater, buy popcorn.